Welcome to my review of The Hateful Eight, directed by Quentin Tarantino, a western that follows a post-Civil War veteran turned bounty hunter, Marquis Warren, who hitches a ride on a Red Rock-bound carriage carrying yet another bounty hunter by the name of John Ruth the Hangman with Daisy Domergue in his captivity. But while making a pit stop at a haberdashery, a blizzard starts to approach, and those destined for Red Rock are now stranded alongside strangers who potentially pose a threat to those who have righteous endeavors. So ever since I was 15 and saw Pulp Fiction for the very first time, I've always been a fan of Quentin Tarantino's, and I've seen his films multiple times, with the exclusion of Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, and I've only seen Death Proof twice, and the reason why I saw it twice is because I loved the first half, hated the second half, and I wanted to see how I thought about it the second time, and it was pretty much the same. And even though I may not be as big of a Tarantino fan as I was back when I saw Pulp Fiction when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I still very much love Pulp Fiction. I think Reservoir Dogs is a great movie, and I really love Inglourious Basterds. Jackie Brown is a very underrated film, and Django Unchained, despite its flaws, I still think is a very enjoyable film with some great central performances. But what's interesting is that as of recently, there have been people who have been debating whether or not Tarantino has fallen off the wagon or not. Is he still creating great films? And I think he still has that greatness in him. Albeit, of course, yes, he hasn't made a film that's as great as Pulp Fiction. People are always trying to say, oh, this is his best film since Pulp Fiction. Well, in my opinion, I think his best film since Pulp Fiction is Inglourious Basterds. I know some people may disagree with that, but I do love that film. And of course, I did hear some people say that about Django Unchained, and I have been hearing some people say that about The Hateful Eight. And I think deep down, some people, they just want to see that Tarantino that we saw when he did Pulp Fiction. But I think that Tarantino has kind of left. He's not quite there anymore. You look at some of Tarantino's peers such as Paul Thomas Anderson, who went from making movies such as Boogie Nights, which is an incredible film, to movies such as There'll Be Blood or The Master. Very mature films, but not just in terms of filmmaking, but in terms of just the overall mentality of those films, while you look at someone like Tarantino, who has done the exact opposite. Instead of doing films that are of a higher class or doing things that are at least more adult, his films have become goofier. And essentially, they have become just live-action cartoons. Look at Django Unchained. And that is something that bugs me more and more every single time I return to that film. But what really surprised me about The Hateful Eight is how less indulgent the film is. But then Walton Goggins shows up. And that's when the movie goes into full-fledged Tarantino mode and becomes a freaking cartoon. If you thought Django Unchained was over the top with caricatures, well, Django Unchained doesn't have shit on The Hateful Eight. Albeit that some are more than others, every single character in this film are nothing more than caricatures, and sort of unfunny caricatures at that. To put it in better perspective, you know those background characters in Django Unchained that have those very exaggerated personalities and accents? Well, there are two central characters in this movie that are exactly that. You have the Tim Roth character who speaks with a very over-the-top British accent. I'm not sure if you would classify that as posh. And then you have Walton Goggins, who I've mentioned earlier, who speaks with a very twangy southern drawl, and it's incredibly annoying. Oh, and I also forgot this one character played by Demian Bashir. Not sure if I said that right, but whatever, I tried. And he plays this Mexican character. And it's just borderline offensive on how he talks. Because he talks like this, man, you know, it's very exaggerated and raspy, you know. It's like, what the fuck? Am I watching a Michael Bay movie here or something? I'm sorry. That's Michael Bay territory, because that really is, it's kind of crass. Now, to be fair, this is something that hasn't or will not bother all. So in other words, if you're somebody who can watch something such as this,
well, looks like Minnie's haberdashery is about to get cozy for the next few days.
Or this,
well, I'll be double dog damn. General Sandy don't give a damn Smithers.
and not be the least bit annoyed or bothered by that, then you should be okay, because it honestly did. It got on my nerves. Now, before you click the dislike button and you click unsubscribe and you hate me forever, I want to say this. There are some great things about this film, incredible things about this movie, but I'm going to save those for the very end of this review because I want to end on a positive note. One of my other major complaints is that this movie clocks in at around 3 hours. And I would say that the first hour could easily be cut down to like maybe 30 because there's a whole lot of nothing going on in that first hour. One thing Tarantino is known for doing is crafting great, memorable dialogue. And I would say that's the case here, but only in certain moments of the film. That first hour, Outside of one conversation regarding race and the Civil War, I thought that was good. A little too long, but good. Everything else outside of that one piece of dialogue and the gorgeous cinematography, that's kind of all the first half has, for me at least. Granted that the setup itself is very much decent and the dialogue is very far from being bad, I just don't think that the setup needed to be an hour long. We get to see characters nailing stakes to the ground. We get to see characters wrestle with a door that has gone awry and nail it shut. And we get to see that not only once, not twice, but 3 times. I think, honestly, it would have worked better if it were just background humor, like it is the 3rd time it shows it. That could have been funny, but it just kind of was. It was just sort of like, okay, well, what's the point? I get it. Living in Wyoming when there's a blizzard, much less snowing, life probably really sucked back then. And finally, after that very long and strenuous setup, the movie finally begins and becomes something very much engaging. And that's because it introduces this mystery. And that is, who is the person in this haberdashery is going to be the one to help out Daisy Domergue, to try to free her. And that's when the tensions start to rise. Quentin Tarantino still knows how to do tension, and the mystery itself I found to be very enthralling because I was on the edge of my seat trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be the one to screw them over? It doesn't cop out. It actually goes to some place that I thought was really well executed. And one thing that needs to be said about this film is how atmospheric it is. The cinematography, I mentioned it earlier by calling it gorgeous. Well, it is unbelievably gorgeous. It is done by Robert Richardson, who has done some of Quentin Tarantino's films in the past. This film is seriously eye-popping, and I can't even imagine how it looks in 70mm. So if you have a chance of seeing this in 70mm, go see it. Really, it's worth your time. Whether you like the movie or not, I think that's kind of irrelevant. Just see it for the cinematography, if you're somebody who appreciates great cinematography. And I also had to give a quick praise to the sound design as well, because I thought that was fantastic. I said earlier in this review that all the characters in this film are pretty much caricatures. And I would probably say that for everybody, with maybe the exclusion of Samuel Jackson. He has a little bit more complexity versus everybody else. And I bring that up because even though I can't say that I necessarily cared for anybody in the film, I will say that I did find myself sort of rooting for a character towards the end because I kind of hated everyone else more. And if that was one of Quentin's intentions, which I do believe it was, then it works. As far as the performances go, I think they're all pretty fantastic despite the hammed up, over-the-top nature of everything. Tim Roth is great despite his character. Walton Goggins, I think, is great despite his character. Jennifer Jason Leigh is great despite her character. Then there are the performances that are more subtle in comparison, such as Bruce Dern's, Kurt Russell's, and then of course there is Samuel Jackson. And when Samuel Jackson is in your film, and he's not the most outrageous one, then you may have missed the mark just a tad. Samuel L. Jackson freaking brings it in this movie like he pretty much always does, and there's this one scene between him and Bruce Dern that is actually pretty phenomenal, and you'll know the scene I'm talking about when you get to it. In other words, it's classic Samuel Jackson / Quentin Tarantino. As for any last complaints or any last statements I want to make about The Hateful Eight, one is a complaint, and that is there's a scene that features a whole lot of vomiting, and I thought it was not funny, nor was it like shocking or anything. It was just kind of stupid. Overall, what sets The Hateful Eight back from being a great film is the lack of editing, the lack of containment, because the movie is way too self-indulgent in parts. As great of a filmmaker Quentin Tarantino is, and I wouldn't go as far as to call him a filmmaking genius like some people out there, he still needs some kind of guidance, like most, if not all, filmmakers should have. The film is too long, tonally it is all over the place, the characters are pretty much caricatures, and then the dialogue. As great some of it is a little lackluster and I think is kind of exhausting. I know Quentin Tarantino is somebody who absolutely adores cinema and respects it immensely, and for that I respect him immensely. But I can't say that I love this film because I don't love this film. This is actually one of my least favorite Quentin Tarantino films. At one point I was thinking a 2.5 out of 5, but then I started thinking of all the great things about this film. And if it were just the great things alone, this film would easily be a 4, but for now, it's just a very light 3 out of 5. Apparently everyone else has been loving this film, so unfortunately I'm in the minority. But if you're somebody who has seen this film, then do let me know your thoughts on it, or if you're somebody who is a fan of Quentin Tarantino. Are you? Are you not? Let me know. And as always, I'm Colin Kirkland, and thank you so much for watching.